The stars in the empty space near the edge of the solar system suddenly began to shimmer and bend. The darkness twisted like water being stirred by an invisible hand. Then, with a flash of bright blue light, something massive appeared where nothing had been before. It was not one ship. It was many ships, hundreds of them. The alien vessels hung in the cold vacuum like giant crystals made of ice and metal. Each ship was beautiful in its own terrible way. Their hulls gleamed with a pale, ghostly light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. Strange symbols covered their surfaces, glowing with colors that human eyes had never seen before. Admiral Vextar stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the largest vessel in the fleet. His body was tall and thin, covered in smooth gray skin that reflected the light from the control panels around him. 4 arms moved with quick, precise motions as he worked the ship's controls. His head was long and narrow, with large black eyes that saw everything. When he was pleased, his mouth parts would click together in a sound that other species had learned to fear. The Admiral looked at the small yellow star ahead of them. Around it, several planets moved in their slow dance through space. The third planet from the star was the one he wanted. His scouts had been watching it for many cycles, listening to the strange radio signals that came from its surface. "Humans," he said, and his mouth parts clicked with amusement. Such a young species, such a primitive world. His second-in-command, Commander Zithka, moved closer. She was smaller than the Admiral, but just as deadly. Her weapons training was legendary throughout the Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral, our sensors show no orbital defenses around their planet," she reported. "No energy shields, no military space stations. Their technology appears to be very basic." Vextar's eyes grew bright with excitement. This was going to be easier than he had hoped. In the past 50 years, his fleet had conquered 17 different worlds. Each time they had faced desperate resistance from species that knew they were about to lose everything. The battles had been long and difficult. Many Zephyrian warriors had died. But this time would be different. The humans seemed to have no idea what was coming. "How many ships do they have in space?" the Admiral asked. "Very few, sir. We detect some small vessels moving between their planet and their moon. Nothing that could threaten even our smallest fighter craft." The Admiral walked to the great window at the front of his bridge. Through it, he could see the other ships of his fleet spread out like a deadly cloud in space. Each ship contained hundreds of warriors. Each warrior was trained from birth to fight and conquer. The Zephyrian Empire had spread across the galaxy by taking what they wanted from weaker species. "Their radio signals show they fight among themselves constantly," Commander Zithka continued. "They seem to spend most of their time making war on their own kind. They have not learned to unite against outside threats." This made the Admiral even more pleased. Divided enemies were always easier to defeat. The humans would probably surrender quickly once they realized how hopeless their situation was. Then they could be put to work in the Empire's mines and factories. The strong ones might even be trained as soldiers for future conquests. "Begin the approach," Vextar ordered. "But slowly. I want them to see us coming. I want them to understand what is about to happen to their world." The great fleet began to move forward. Each ship was powered by engines that bent space itself, allowing them to travel faster than light. But now they moved at normal speed, like hunters stalking prey. As they flew deeper into the solar system, the fleet's sensors gathered more information about the humans and their planet. The species lived on only one world, with no colonies on other planets. Their population was large but scattered across the surface in thousands of separate groups. They had many different languages and seemed to disagree about almost everything. "Perfect," thought the Admiral. "They will be too busy fighting each other to organize any real defense." The human ships they detected were small and slow. Most seemed to be used for carrying supplies or conducting simple research. None appeared to be built for war. The largest human vessel they found was a space station that orbited their planet. It was tiny compared to even the smallest Zephyrian warship. "Admiral," called out the communications officer. "We are receiving signals from the human space station. They seem to be trying to contact us." "Ignore them for now," Vextar replied. "Let them wonder what we are. Let them fear what we might do. Fear makes the conquest easier." But privately, the Admiral was curious about what the humans might say. Would they beg for mercy? Would they try to offer him gifts in exchange for their lives? Most species did one or the other when they first encountered the Zephyrian fleet. The fleet continued its slow approach. They passed the outer planets, large gas giants with many moons. The Admiral's sensors detected no hidden bases or defensive platforms. The humans really seemed to have no military presence in space at all. Such confidence, Commander Zithka observed. Or such ignorance. They must believe they are alone in the universe. "Both will serve our purposes," the Admiral replied. As they flew closer to the human planet, the fleet's appearance began to change. Weapon ports opened along the sides of each ship. Energy began to build in the plasma cannons that could melt mountains. The ships spread out into attack formation, ready to rain destruction on any target the Admiral chose. The humans were still sending radio signals, but now the transmissions seemed more urgent. The Admiral could imagine the panic spreading across their world as they realized they were facing something far beyond their ability to fight. "Sir," the communications officer said again, "the signals are becoming stronger. They appear to be coming from many different locations on the planet's surface." "Military bases?" asked Commander Zithka. "Unknown, sir. The technology is too primitive for our sensors to determine much detail." The Admiral decided it was time to end the suspense. He had played with his prey long enough. Now it was time to make his demands and watch the humans realize how hopeless their situation truly was. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Let us introduce ourselves to these humans." The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of a human. The creature was smaller than a Zephyrian, with only 2 arms and strange hair growing from the top of its head. It wore some kind of uniform and sat in what appeared to be a command center. The human spoke first, its voice carried across space by radio waves. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the International Space Station. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Admiral Vextar stepped forward so the human could see him clearly. He made sure his weapons and the deadly appearance of his ship were visible in the background. "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced, his voice strong and commanding. "Your species is now under our control. You have one choice to make. Surrender immediately and become servants of the Empire, or be destroyed. You have 10 of your time periods called minutes to decide." The human captain stared at him for a long moment. The Admiral expected to see fear, or maybe desperate attempts to negotiate. Instead, the human's face showed something he did not expect. Determination. "Negative," Captain Chen replied calmly. "Earth stands." Admiral Vextar's mouth parts clicked with surprise, and then with dark amusement. These humans were braver than he had expected, but bravery without power was just another form of foolishness. "So be it," he said, and cut the communication. The conquest of Earth was about to begin. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the command center of the International Space Station, looking at the blank screen where the alien admiral had been just moments before. Around her, the station's crew worked at their controls with calm, practiced movements. No one seemed surprised by what had just happened. "All stations, this is Captain Chen," she said into her microphone. "Condition red. The package is confirmed hostile. Repeat, the package is confirmed hostile." Across the Earth and throughout the solar system, those words triggered responses that had been planned for decades. In hidden bunkers buried deep underground, massive computers came to life. In control rooms that did not appear on any public map, men and women in military uniforms began pressing buttons and turning keys. The alien admiral had made one very important mistake. He thought the humans were primitive and divided. He was. Wrong on both counts. Dr. James Morrison sat in a facility buried 3 miles beneath the mountains of Colorado. As the director of the Solar Defense Network, he had spent the last 20 years preparing for this exact moment. The message from Captain Chen appeared on his screen, along with data from sensors that the aliens did not know existed. 312 enemy vessels, reported his aide, Colonel Martinez. Size range from 200 meters to over 3 kilometers. Energy readings are off the charts. Any sign they've detected our assets? Dr. Morrison asked. Negative, sir. They're still moving slowly toward Earth. Their sensors seem to be focused on the planet and our civilian installations. Dr. Morrison nodded. The aliens were making the same mistake that many enemies had made before them. They were looking at what humans wanted them to see, not at what was really there. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for first contact since the 1960s. Not the peaceful kind that scientists talked about in public, but the other kind. The kind where visitors from space came not as friends, but as conquerors. The first hints had come from radio telescopes that detected patterns in space that should not exist. Signals that seemed artificial, but came from sources too far away to be human. Then came the discovery of faster-than-light travel, hidden in equations, that most scientists thought were just theoretical. But some humans had understood what those discoveries really meant. If humanity could figure out how to travel faster than light, then other species probably could too. And if they were more advanced than humans, they might not come in peace. Status report on all defense platforms, Dr. Morrison ordered. Platforms 1 through 47 are online and ready, Colonel Martinez replied. Power levels at maximum. Targeting computers are locked onto the enemy fleet. The alien admiral would have been shocked to learn what those defense platforms really were. To his sensors, they looked like ordinary satellites, the kind that primitive species used for communication and weather monitoring. In reality, they were weapons that could destroy planets. Each platform contained a magnetic railgun that could fire tungsten rods at nearly the speed of light. The aliens' energy shields, designed to stop plasma weapons and laser beams, would be useless against chunks of metal moving that fast. Sir, Colonel Martinez said, we're getting reports from the hidden bases. Those bases were another secret that the aliens knew nothing about. Over the past 50 years, humans had built military installations inside asteroids throughout the solar system. From the outside, they looked like natural rocks floating in space. Inside, they contained missile systems, fighter craft, and some weapons that even Dr. Morrison did not fully understand. Asteroid Base 7 reports ready, Martinez continued. Stealth fighters are armed and waiting for launch orders. Base 12 has all missile tubes loaded. Base 23 says their new experimental weapon is charged and ready for testing. Dr. Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens thought they were attacking a primitive world with no defenses. Instead, they were about to face a military network that had been built specifically to destroy exactly this kind of threat. On the space station, Captain Chen watched the alien fleet continue its approach. She knew that every human military leader on Earth was watching the same display. In the Pentagon, in the Kremlin, in military headquarters around the world, generals and admirals were coordinating humanity's response. Captain, said Lieutenant Williams, her communications officer, we're receiving a priority message from General Harrison at Earth Defense Command. The screen flickered, showing the weathered face of a 4-star general. Behind him, Chen could see the main command center where representatives from every major military on Earth worked together. Captain Chen, this is General Harrison. You are now the official spokesperson for the human race. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, remember that you represent all of us. Understood, sir, Chen replied. Any change in our rules of engagement? Negative. The rules remain the same as always. If they shoot first, we respond with overwhelming force. Make sure they understand that we gave them a chance. The rules of engagement had been debated and refined for decades. Humans would not start a war with alien visitors, but they would finish one if forced to. The idea was simple. Any species aggressive enough to attack without provocation was too dangerous to be allowed to survive. "Sir," Lieutenant Williams called out, "the alien fleet is changing formation. They're spreading out into what looks like an attack pattern." Chen nodded. She had expected this. The Admiral had given them 10 minutes to surrender, and about 8 minutes had passed. Soon, the aliens would realize that no surrender was coming. "All stations," she announced, "prepare for incoming transmission from the enemy fleet." The FIOS screen activated again, showing Admiral Vextar. This time his expression was different. The amusement was gone, replaced by cold anger. "Humans," he said, his voice carrying across space, "your time has ended. Since you choose to resist, you will be destroyed. Your planet will be burned clean, and your species will be erased from the galaxy. This is your final warning." Captain Chen looked directly into the alien's large black eyes. "Admiral Vexitar," she said calmly, "you are making a mistake. Withdraw your fleet now and no harm will come to you. This is your final warning." The alien admiral's mouth parts clicked rapidly, a sound that his crew recognized as extreme anger. "You dare to threaten me? You with your tiny ships and primitive weapons? I will enjoy watching your world burn." "Admiral," Chen said, her voice still calm and steady, "you are about to attack a sovereign world without provocation. We have the right to defend ourselves. If you open fire, we will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly." "War?" The Admiral's laughter was a horrible sound. "What war could you possibly fight against the Zephyrian Empire? Your entire species could not destroy a single one of our ships." Chen leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, I'm going to tell you something important. My species has been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and arrows, with gunpowder and bullets, with tanks, and airplanes with nuclear weapons and guided missiles. We've never stopped fighting, and we've gotten very, very good at it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We've been waiting for someone like you for a long time. We've been preparing. We've been practicing. And now you're here, about to give us the one thing we've always been best at, a war to fight." The alien admiral stared at her for a long moment. Then his expression changed to one of contempt. "Enough of this foolishness," he said. "Destroy them all." The communication ended. Captain Chen turned to her crew. "All stations, this is Captain Chen. The aliens have declared their intent to destroy Earth. As of this moment, we are at war. Weapons free. Repeat, weapons free." Throughout the solar system, the hidden defenses of humanity came to life. The real battle was about to begin. The first shots of the war came from the alien fleet. Admiral Vexitar's flagship fired a massive beam of superheated plasma toward Earth. The energy weapon was powerful enough to boil away oceans and melt continents. It had destroyed cities on 17 different worlds. The beam never reached its target. Exactly 2.3 seconds after the aliens opened fire, something impossible happened. The satellites that had been floating peacefully around Earth suddenly revealed their true nature. What the aliens had thought were simple communication devices were actually weapons platforms, and they began firing back. Tungsten rods, each, one the size of a telephone pole, shot out from the hidden railguns at tremendous speed. They moved so fast that they seemed to appear instantly beside the alien ships. The rods hit with the force of nuclear weapons, but without the radiation or the flash of light. They just punched straight through. The first alien ship to die was a medium-sized cruiser on the left side of their formation. One moment it was there, weapons charging for a second shot at Earth. The next moment, there was a hole clean through its center, and the ship was breaking apart as atmosphere and crew were sucked out into space. Admiral Vextar stared in shock as 12 more of his ships simply ceased to exist. The tungsten rods moved too fast for his sensors to track properly. His crew could only watch as their ships were destroyed by weapons they couldn't even see coming. "Shields!" he shouted. "Raise all shields!" But the Zephyrian shields were designed to stop energy weapons like lasers and plasma beams. They were useless against solid objects moving at such incredible speeds. The tungsten rods passed through the energy barriers as if they weren't even there. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. There are weapons platforms everywhere." That was when the asteroids began to move. What Admiral Vextar had dismissed as simple space rocks suddenly revealed themselves to be military bases. Hidden doors opened in their rocky surfaces, and missiles began pouring out. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Each missile was guided by computers that could calculate the movement of targets across millions of miles of space. Each one carried enough explosive power to crack open a mountainside, and they were all aimed at the Zephyrian fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," the Admiral ordered. "All ships, evasive maneuvers." But his fleet had been designed for attacking planets, not for fighting this kind of mobile warfare. The ships were large and powerful, but they were also slow to change direction. The human missiles were small and fast, and they seemed to anticipate every move the aliens made. The first wave of missiles hit the alien formation like a swarm of angry wasps. Explosions bloomed throughout the fleet as ships tried desperately to shoot down the incoming weapons. Some succeeded, but there were too many missiles and not enough time. A Zephyrian destroyer vanished in a ball of fire. A troop transport broke in half, spilling soldiers into the vacuum of space. The aliens' return fire was devastating, but it was aimed at empty space where the missile platforms had been just moments before. The humans, it seemed, understood something about warfare that the Zephyrians had never learned. Always keep moving and never be where your enemy expects you to be. "Sir," Commander Zithka reported, her voice tight with worry, "we've lost 47 ships in the first 3 minutes. At this rate, the entire fleet will be destroyed within the hour." Admiral Vextar couldn't believe what he was seeing. His sensors showed that the humans had turned the entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every satellite, every piece of space debris that he had ignored was now revealing itself to be part of a massive defense network. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're primitives. They should have no weapons that could threaten us." "Admiral," his science officer called out, "I'm reading the composition of those projectiles. They're not using exotic materials or advanced energy systems. It's just metal rods moving at extremely high velocity." The Admiral's mouth parts clicked in disbelief. The humans had taken the simplest possible weapon, a chunk of metal, and found a way to make it devastatingly effective. It was brutal in its simplicity and terrifying in its efficiency. But what made it even worse was the way the humans fought. There was no panic, no desperate charging into battle, no heroic last stands. Instead, there was a cold, calculated precision that made his trained warriors look like amateurs. Every human attack was perfectly coordinated. When the railguns fired, the missiles would be launched to hit targets trying to evade the rods. When alien ships turned to avoid the missiles, they would fly directly into the path of another rail gun. It was as if the humans could predict exactly what his fleet would do and had prepared responses for every possible action. "Sir!" the communications officer shouted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human space station." The screen showed Captain Chen again, but now her calm expression had been replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "you have 30 seconds to order your fleet to withdraw beyond the orbit of Pluto. If you do not comply, we will destroy every ship in your fleet." The Admiral's anger flared. "You think you can threaten me? I have over 200 ships remaining. Your tiny defense network cannot stand against the full might of the Zephyrian Empire." "Admiral," Chen replied, "you haven't seen our full might yet." That was when the stealth fighters attacked. They came out of the dark spaces between the planets, invisible to Zephyrian sensors until they were almost close enough to touch. The alien fleet's instruments had been designed to detect large objects like ships and space stations. They couldn't see small, fast fighters that had been built specifically to avoid detection. The human fighters were like nothing Admiral Vextar had ever encountered. They moved through space like living things, dodging between the larger alien ships and striking at weak points in their armor. Each fighter carried weapons that could punch through the hulls of ships 100 times their size, but it wasn't just their weapons that made them deadly. It was the way they fought. The human pilots flew their ships as if they had been born in space. They used the alien fleet's own size against them, hiding behind destroyed ships and using the debris as cover. When the aliens tried to target them, the fighters would slip away into the shadow of a larger vessel, only to appear somewhere else, entirely. "They're using our own ships against us," Commander Zithka observed with something that might have been admiration. "They're turning our formation into a maze that only they can navigate." The Admiral watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were destroying them with an efficiency that spoke of years of planning and preparation. "Sir," his science officer reported, "I'm detecting something else. There are energy readings from the outer system that don't match anything in our database." "What kind of energy readings?" "Unknown, sir. But they're building towards something. Something big." Admiral Vextar realized that he had made a terrible mistake. These humans weren't primitive at all. They were predators, and they had been waiting for prey like his fleet to arrive. "All ships," he ordered, "begin withdrawal to safe distance. We need to regroup and—" His words were cut off as another wave of missiles struck the fleet. This time. They came from 6 different directions at once, making it impossible for his ships to defend against all of them. More alien vessels died in fire and twisted metal. The humans, Admiral Vextar realized, were not just defending their world, they were hunting his fleet, and they were very good at it. The retreat began, but the Admiral wondered if any of his ships would survive long enough to escape. Admiral Vextar's order to retreat came too late. The human defenders had anticipated this moment and were ready for it. As the surviving Zephyrian ships tried to turn away from Earth and flee toward the outer system, they discovered that the humans had one more surprise waiting for them. The retreat route was blocked. Hidden bases that had remained silent during the first part of the battle now revealed themselves. Massive installations built inside the largest asteroids opened up like mechanical flowers, exposing weapons that the Admiral had never seen before. These weren't railguns or missile launchers. These were something new and terrifying. "Sir," his science officer called out, his voice shaking, "those energy readings I detected earlier, they're coming from those installations. I think they're some kind of particle beam weapons." The first human superweapon fired a stream of accelerated particles that moved at nearly the speed of light. The beam cut through 3 Zephyrian ships in a single shot, slicing them cleanly in half. The edges of the cuts glowed white-hot where the weapon had passed through armor that was supposed to be indestructible. "How many of those things do they have?" Commander Zithka demanded. The answer came in the form of 6 more beams firing simultaneously from different directions. 12 more alien ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons that turned matter into energy. Admiral Vextar realized that his fleet was trapped. The humans had surrounded them with weapons platforms, and every direction led to more destruction. But what made it even worse was the way the humans coordinated their attacks. There was no confusion, no wasted shots, no friendly fire incidents. Every weapon fired at exactly the right moment to achieve maximum damage. It was as if the entire human defense network was controlled by a single mind that could see everything and plan perfectly. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving tactical data from our remaining ships. The humans appear to be using some kind of quantum communication network. Their response time is essentially instantaneous across the entire system." That explained how they could coordinate attacks across millions of miles of space with such precision. But it also meant that the humans had technology that the Zephyrian Empire had only theorized about. These primitives were using communication systems that his own scientists couldn't build. "All ships," the Admiral ordered, "focus fire on the largest human installation. If we can destroy their command center, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. The remaining Zephyrian ships turned their weapons on a massive asteroid base that seemed to be directing many of the attacks. Plasma beams and energy cannons fired together, concentrating enough firepower to destroy a moon. The human base's shields flared to life, absorbing the incoming energy. For a moment, Admiral Vextar thought they might have found a weakness. Then the base fired back. The return shot was devastating. A beam of pure energy, larger than any the aliens had fired, struck the center of the Zephyrian formation. 5 ships vanished instantly, and the ones around them were damaged by the explosion. "Their shields are stronger than ours," Commander Zithka observed, "and their weapons are more powerful. How is this possible?" The Admiral didn't have an answer. Everything he had been told about humans was wrong. They weren't primitive, they weren't divided, and they certainly weren't helpless. "Sir," the tactical officer shouted, "we have incoming fighters from multiple vectors. They're everywhere." The human stealth fighters had multiplied. What had started as a few dozen craft had somehow become hundreds. They swarmed around the alien fleet like angry insects, striking at weak points and vanishing before the aliens could respond. But these weren't the same fighters that had attacked before. These were larger, more heavily armed, and they moved with even greater coordination. Each one seemed to know exactly where every other fighter was, and they worked together like parts of a single organism. "They're not just attacking randomly," Commander Zithka realized. "They're targeting our life support systems, our communications arrays, our navigation equipment. They're trying to disable us, not just destroy us." She was right. The human fighters were striking with surgical precision, cutting away the alien fleet's ability to fight back without necessarily killing the crews. It was a level of tactical sophistication that spoke of a military tradition far older and more refined than anything the Zephyrians had developed. "Admiral," the science officer reported, "I'm detecting something else. There are ships moving toward us from the outer system. Large ships. I think it's a human fleet." Admiral Vextar's hearts sank. If the humans had been holding back their main fleet during the battle, then everything his forces had faced so far was just the opening move. The real attack was still coming. "How many ships?" he asked. "Difficult to determine, sir. They're using some kind of stealth technology that interferes with our sensors. But based on the gravitational distortions, at least 100 vessels, possibly more." The Admiral looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were the finest warriors in the Zephyrian Empire, veterans of dozens of conquests. But now they looked scared and confused. They had never faced an enemy like this before. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving another transmission from the human captain." Captain Chen appeared on the screen again. Behind her, Admiral Vextar could see displays showing the positions of all the ships in both fleets. The human had been watching the entire battle, seeing every move his forces made. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "you now have less than 90 ships remaining out of your original 312. Your fleet is surrounded, outgunned, and cut off from escape. I'm offering you one final chance to surrender." "Surrender?" The Admiral's mouth parts clicked rapidly. "The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender." "Then you will die here," Chen replied simply. "All of you. Is your pride worth the lives of your remaining crews?" The Admiral looked at his tactical display. She was right about the numbers. His fleet had been reduced to scattered groups of damaged ships, surrounded by human weapons platforms and harassed by fighters they couldn't catch or kill. What? What are your terms? He asked, hating himself for the question. Unconditional surrender, Chen replied. You will power down your weapons and surrender your ships. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war, but your vessels will be confiscated as reparations for your unprovoked attack on Earth. It was a total defeat. The greatest fleet in Zephyrian history, reduced to begging for mercy from a species they had intended to enslave. And if I refuse? The Admiral asked. Captain Chen's expression didn't change. Then in approximately 4 minutes, our main fleet will arrive and finish what you started. You've seen what our defensive systems can do. Our attack fleet is considerably more powerful. Admiral Vextar closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see the faces of the thousands of warriors under his command. They had followed him across the galaxy, trusting in his leadership. Now their lives depended on a decision that would destroy his career and his honor. But they would live. He began, then stopped. The words were the hardest he had ever spoken. I accept your terms. The bridge fell silent. Commander Zithka stared at him in shock. The weapons officers looked as if they couldn't believe what they had heard. Attention all ships, the Admiral said into his communicator. This is Admiral Vextar. Stand down all weapons. Prepare for surrender protocols. Captain Chen nodded. You've made the right choice, Admiral. Your crews will be treated with respect. As the human fighters pulled back and the weapons platforms powered down, Admiral Vextar realized that he had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that was supposed to be primitive had not only defeated the mightiest fleet in known space, but had done it in less than 15 minutes. The humans, he understood now, were not the prey. They were the predators, and they had just announced themselves to the galaxy. 3 months after the battle, Admiral Vextar sat in a small room aboard a human space station. The room was comfortable but clearly a prison cell. Through the single window, he could see his flagship being slowly taken apart by human engineers, who were studying every piece of Zephyrian technology. The humans had kept their word about treating prisoners according to their laws of war. The Zephyrian crews were housed in clean facilities, given adequate food, and allowed to communicate with each other. But they were also thoroughly isolated from the galaxy at large, cut off from any chance of rescue or escape. Captain Chen entered the room carrying 2 cups of a hot liquid that the humans called coffee. She offered one to the Admiral, who took it carefully. Over the past months, these daily conversations had become routine. Your government has finally responded to our messages, Chen said, sitting down across from him. Admiral Vextar looked up with interest. What did they say? They claimed that your attack on Earth was unauthorized. They say you acted without orders from the Imperial High Command, and they disavow all responsibility for your actions. The Admiral's mouth parts clicked bitterly. Of course they do. They're saving face while abandoning their own warriors. It's what politicians do when military operations fail. Chen nodded. We suspected as much. But it doesn't matter. We recorded everything that happened, including your communications before the attack. The galaxy will know who fired first. Over the past 3 months, the humans had been very busy. They had sent copies of the battle recordings to every major government in known space. The footage showed clearly that the Zephyrian fleet had approached Earth with hostile intent, demanded surrender, and opened fire when their demands were refused. The galactic response had been swift and dramatic. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrian Empire saw the recordings as proof that the mighty Zephyrians could be defeated. Rebellions had broken out on a dozen worlds. The Empire's carefully maintained image of invincibility was shattered. Your people are quite clever, the Admiral admitted. They could have simply destroyed my fleet and been done with it. Instead, they chose to humiliate the Empire in front of the entire galaxy. It's much more effective than simple destruction. We prefer to avoid unnecessary killing when possible, Chen replied. But we also believe in making sure that aggressors understand the consequences of their actions. The Admiral took a sip of his coffee. The bitter taste had grown on him over the months. What will happen to my crews? That depends on your government. We've offered to exchange prisoners for formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty and a treaty guaranteeing that no Zephyrian forces will enter the Sol system again. So far, your leaders haven't responded to that offer. This didn't surprise the Admiral. The Empire's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride often led to poor decisions. They're probably planning another attack, a larger fleet with more advanced weapons. Captain Chen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We hope they do. The Admiral stared at her. You want them to attack again? Admiral, let me show you something. Chen activated a wall display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of Zephyrian worlds and fleets. Blue dots showed human positions. There were a lot more blue dots than there had been 3 months ago. We've been very busy since your attack, Chen explained. We've made contact with dozens of species that have been oppressed by your empire. We've shared technology with them. We've helped them organize resistance movements. We've built new bases throughout the galaxy. The Admiral studied the map with growing alarm. The humans hadn't just defended their world. They had used the victory as a launching point for something much larger. You're building an alliance, he realized. We're building a coalition of free worlds, Chen corrected. Species that are tired of being bullied by empires like yours. And we're teaching them how to fight back. The Admiral thought about the battle he had witnessed. The precision, the coordination, the ruthless efficiency of the human defense. If they were sharing that knowledge with other species. Your empire has made a lot of enemies over the centuries, Chen continued. We're simply giving those enemies the tools they need to defend themselves and the confidence to use them. This could lead to a galactic war, the Admiral warned. It could, Chen agreed. But it won't be the kind of war your empire is used to fighting. You're accustomed to attacking primitive worlds that can't fight back effectively. This time, you'll be facing enemies who know how to hurt you. The display changed, showing recent intelligence reports. Zephyrian outposts had been attacked by unknown forces using human weapons and tactics. Supply convoys had been ambushed by fighters that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The Empire's expansion had not just stopped, it was being pushed back. The other great powers in the galaxy are watching all of this very carefully, Chen said. They're seeing that the Zephyrian Empire can be defeated. Some of them are starting to think about old grievances of their own. Admiral Vextar understood the implications. The Empire had maintained its position through fear and the belief that they were unbeatable. Now that myth was destroyed. Other powers that had submitted to Zephyrian dominance out of necessity might decide that submission was no longer required. You've started something that you might not be able to control, he warned. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But we didn't start this war. Your empire did when it decided that conquest and slavery were acceptable ways to expand. We're simply finishing what you began. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications of everything he had learned. Finally, he asked the question that had been troubling him for months. Why are you telling me all of this? Why share your plans with a prisoner? Captain Chen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the remains of the Zephyrian flagship. Because, Admiral, you're going home. What? We're releasing you. You and a small crew to operate a single ship. You're going to return to the Zephyrian Empire and deliver a message from Earth. The Admiral couldn't hide his surprise. What message? Chen turned back to face him. That Earth and its allies are willing to coexist peacefully with any species that respects our sovereignty, but we will not tolerate aggression, conquest, or slavery. Any empire that practices these things will face the same fate as your fleet. They won't listen, the Admiral said. The High Command will see this as weakness. They'll assume you're afraid of a real war. Then they'll be making the same mistake you made, Chen replied. They'll be underestimating humans. And the species, we've taught to fight like humans. She walked toward the door, then paused. Admiral, let me give you some advice. When you get home, tell your leaders exactly what you saw here. Don't leave anything out. Don't try to make it sound less devastating than it was. Their survival may depend on understanding the truth. After she left, Admiral Vextar sat alone with his thoughts. Through the window he could see human ships, moving through space with the same deadly grace he had witnessed during the battle. In the distance, alien vessels from a dozen different species worked alongside human crews, learning new ways to fight and defend themselves. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and the Zephyrian Empire was no longer the dominant force it had once been. The humans had changed everything in the space of a few minutes, and the changes were still spreading. The Admiral thought about the message he would carry home. His leaders would probably ignore his warnings, dismiss his reports as the ravings of a defeated commander trying to excuse his failure. They would plan new attacks, build larger fleets, and march confidently toward their own destruction. But he would deliver the message anyway, because Captain Chen was right about one thing. The survival of his people might depend on understanding what they were really facing. The humans had taught the galaxy a new lesson, that predators sometimes looked like prey, that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who appeared weak, and that a species that had spent its entire history learning how to fight wars was not one to be underestimated. Admiral Vextar finished his coffee and prepared for the journey home. He had a story to tell, and he wondered if anyone would be wise enough to listen. Outside his window, the human ships continued their patient work, preparing for whatever came next in a galaxy that would never be the same again.
The stars glittered like distant jewels against the black canvas of space. For most species across the galaxy, these stars represented wonder and beauty. For the Vorax, they were merely signposts marking their next hunting grounds. A massive Vorax warship moved silently through the void, its jagged edges and bone-like protrusions making it look more like a living creature than a vessel. Inside, Supreme Hunter Karak stood before the viewing window, his scaled skin reflecting the dim red light of the command center. His four eyes narrowed as he studied the small blue planet that appeared on the long-range scanners. Another world, ripe for the hunt, he growled, his multiple rows of teeth glistening. What species inhabits this system? The intelligence officer approached, keeping his head lowered in respect. They call themselves humans, Supreme Hunter. Relatively new to space travel. Only 7 major colonies beyond their homeworld. Karax made a sound between a hiss and a laugh. New prey is always the sweetest. Prepare the vanguard. We will follow the sacred pattern. The sacred pattern had served the Vorax for thousands of years. Isolate, terrify, devour. No species had ever disrupted this ritual of conquest. On the edge of human space, the colony of New Eden shimmered under its protective dome. The agricultural world was home to 50,000 settlers who had transformed what was once barren rock into productive farmland that helped feed Earth's growing population. Elaine Ward stood at the observation deck, watching farmers tend to their crops in the massive greenhouses. As military commander of the colony's small defense force, she had grown to love this peaceful outpost. A career soldier with 20 years of service, New Eden had been her first command, and she took pride in how it had flourished over the past 3 years. Her comm unit beeped, interrupting her thoughts. "Commander, we're picking up something strange." "On the long-range sensors," said the voice of her second-in-command, Lieutenant John Franklin. "I'll be right there," she replied, taking one last look at the peaceful scene below before heading to the command center. The command center was a flurry of activity when she arrived. Franklin, a tall man with keen eyes and steady hands, stood by the main console. His usual calm demeanor seemed shaken. "What have we got?" Elaine asked, moving to his side. "A ship, ma'am. Bigger than anything in our database. It's not responding to hails and it's heading straight for us." Franklin brought up the visual on the main screen. Elaine felt her blood run cold. The approaching vessel looked nothing like the sleek ships of Earth or the geometric designs of the peaceful Centauri Alliance. This ship resembled a massive predator, all sharp angles and threatening protrusions. How long until it reaches us? Less than 3 hours at current speed, Franklin replied. Elaine made her decision quickly. Send a distress call to Earth Fleet Command. Wake up the defense grid and begin evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. You think it's hostile? Franklin asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I hope I'm wrong, Elaine said, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. 2 hours later, their questions were answered. 3 smaller ships detached from the massive vessel and accelerated toward the colony. When they were within range, they opened fire without warning or communication. The colony's shields held against the first volley, but the second tore through them like they were paper. Evacuation status? Elaine shouted over the blaring alarms. 30% of civilians loaded, Franklin reported, his fingers flying over the console. The rest are being moved to shelters. A massive explosion rocked the command center as one of the defensive gun emplacements was hit. We need more time, Elaine said, making another quick decision. Lieutenant, I want you on the last transport. Take as many people as you can and the data from our sensors. Earth needs to know what we're facing. What about you, Commander? I'll coordinate the ground defense and buy you time, she said, checking her sidearm. That's an order, Lieutenant. Franklin hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. The battle for New Eden was brief and brutal. The colony's defenses, designed to handle pirates or small raiding parties, were no match for the advanced weapons of the Vorax. Elaine led a group of soldiers in a desperate stand at the main shield generator, trying to keep it online long enough for the last transports to escape. From her position, she saw the aliens for the first time as they breached the outer perimeter. They moved with frightening speed, their armor-plated bodies absorbing weapons fire that would have killed a human instantly. They didn't use cover or employ tactics. They simply charged forward, relentless, and seemingly unstoppable. Here. Firing, she ordered as another soldier fell beside her. We need 5 more minutes. Her comm unit crackled to life. Commander, this is Franklin. Last transport is loaded and ready for launch. Get out of here, Lieutenant, she replied, firing her rifle at an approaching alien. That's a direct order. Yes, ma'am. Good luck. There was a pause before he added, It's been an honor. Elaine watched as the final transport rose from the landing pad, accelerating toward space. Several alien ships moved to intercept it, but the transport had a head start and was smaller and more maneuverable. Go, Franklin, she whispered. Tell them what happened here. The aliens breached the final defensive line. Elaine emptied her weapon at the closest one, watching in dismay as the bullets barely slowed it down. As it approached, she got a clear look at its face. 4 eyes, arranged in a predator's forward-facing pattern, all focused on her with terrible intelligence and hunger. She reached for her last grenade. Franklin's transport shuddered as it accelerated away from New Eden. The small view screen showed the colony burning, alien ships circling it like vultures. Of the 50,000 colonists, he had managed to save fewer than 300. Lieutenant, called the pilot. One of them is pursuing us. Franklin moved to the cockpit. Emergency jump as soon as we're clear of the gravity well. The drive isn't fully charged, the pilot warned. We might not make it all the way to Earth. We just need to get away from that thing, Franklin said. We have to warn Earth. The ship lurched as enemy fire grazed their engines. The pilot worked the controls frantically, pushing the transport beyond its intended capabilities. Jump in 5 seconds, the pilot announced. Franklin watched the scanner as the alien ship closed the distance. They're faster than us, we're not going to make it. Just as the alien vessel came within optimal firing range, the stars blurred around them as the jump drive activated. The damaged transport hurtled through folded space, leaving New Eden and its attackers behind. In the sudden quiet after the jump, Franklin looked around at the frightened faces of the survivors. Children clutched their parents. Medical staff tended to the wounded. Everyone wore the same expression of shock and disbelief. Where are we? he asked the pilot. She checked the navigation system. About halfway to Alpha Centauri. The drive is fried. We'll need to limp the rest of the way on conventional engines. Franklin nodded. Send a coded message to Earth Fleet Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them. He paused, the image of those 4 hungry eyes still vivid in his mind. Tell them the predators have come. The transport ship limped into Earth's orbital defense perimeter 3 weeks after escaping New Eden. Its hull was scorched, life support systems barely functioning. By the time Earth fleet vessels reached them, 27 survivors had died, from injuries or system failures. Lieutenant John Franklin stood on shaky legs as medical personnel helped the remaining survivors off the ship. His uniform hung loose on his frame after weeks of rationed supplies. Dark circles framed his eyes, but they remained alert and determined. Admiral Catherine Winters waited at the boarding ramp. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. She commanded Earth's defense forces with cool efficiency and unwavering resolve. Lieutenant Franklin, she said, her voice calm, despite the gravity of the situation. Walk with me. Franklin followed her to a secure meeting room overlooking the blue curve of Earth. Several grim-faced military leaders and scientists sat around a large table. Tell them what you told me, Winters said. Franklin cleared his throat. The colony of New Eden was attacked without warning by an unknown species. They ignored all communication attempts. Their technology far exceeds ours. Commander Ward and most of the colony's 50,000 inhabitants were killed. He paused, steadying himself. I have sensor data and visual recordings. A technician inserted Franklin's data chip into the table's central terminal. The room darkened as images appeared in the air above them. The recordings showed the alien ships, the brutal efficiency of their attack, and finally, close-up images of the Vorax themselves. 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, with 4 forward-facing eyes that glinted with cold intelligence. They moved like predators, Franklin continued. No fear, no caution. They seemed to enjoy the hunt. A man at the far end of the table leaned forward. His rumpled clothes and unkempt hair stood in stark contrast to the crisp uniforms around him. Fascinating, he said, studying the images with intense focus. Their eye placement, body structure, movement patterns, all classic apex predator traits. Admiral Winters nodded toward him. Lieutenant Franklin, meet Dr. Peter Lawson, xenobiologist specializing in predatory behavior. Lawson stood and walked around the table, examining the floating images from different angles. I've studied predators across 12 planets, but nothing like this. These creatures evolved as pack hunters, but highly intelligent ones. He pointed to features on the alien's body. Natural armor, multiple redundant systems. They evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they came out on top. That's very interesting, Doctor, one of the military officers said impatiently. But how do we stop them? Lawson smiled, though there was no humor in it. That's exactly what makes it relevant. If we understand how they hunt, we can predict their behavior. Franklin looked at the scientist with new interest. You're saying we should think of them as animals? Highly evolved, technologically advanced animals, Lawson corrected. But yes, all predators follow patterns. It's hardwired into their brains. Admiral Winters stepped forward. We've received reports of attacks on 2 more frontier colonies since New Eden fell. We're dealing with a systematic invasion. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We need to assemble a team, Winters continued. The best minds we have. Dr. Lawson will lead the scientific analysis. Captain Susan Blake, I want you heading tactical. A woman with close-cropped blonde hair nodded sharply. Yes, Admiral. Major Alan Rodriguez will command our special response forces, Winters added, nodding to a broad-shouldered man with watchful eyes. And Lieutenant Franklin, she said, turning to him, you're the only person who's seen these creatures in action. And lived. We need you. Franklin straightened despite his exhaustion. I'm ready, Admiral. Over the next week, reports of attacks came in from across the outer colonies. Each followed the same pattern. Communications cut off, followed by total destruction. Earth's fleet scrambled to evacuate the most vulnerable outposts, but they were always one step behind the Vorax. In the Lunar Defense Headquarters, Dr. Lawson's team worked around the clock analyzing every piece of data they could gather. The central lab had been transformed into what some called the Hunter's Den, walls covered with images and diagrams of the Vorax. Franklin entered the lab after a brief, uneasy sleep. Dr. Lawson stood in the center of the room, staring at a three-dimensional model of a Vorax ship's attack pattern. "You should be resting," Lawson said without turning around. "So should you," Franklin replied. Lawson nodded absently. "I noticed something in your footage from New Eden. The Vorax ships moved in a specific formation when they attacked. 3 points of a triangle. Like wolves circling prey," Franklin said, remembering his grandfather's stories of hunting in the mountains of Earth. "Exactly!" Lawson spun to face him, excitement breaking through his fatigue. "And what do wolves do when they hunt? They drive their prey toward an ambush point." Franklin studied the attack pattern. But there was no ambush. At New Eden, they just attacked from 3 directions. "Yes, because they were dealing with a fixed target," Lawson explained. "But look at this." He pulled up footage from another colony attack where the defenders had attempted to flee. The Vorax ships had split their formation, some pursuing directly, while others curved away, only to reappear ahead of the fleeing vessels. "They're using the same hunting tactics their ancestors used on their homeworld," Lawson said. "Just adapted for space." Captain Blake entered the lab, her expression serious but her eyes alert with interest. "If they hunt like predators, can they be trapped like predators?" "That's what I'm thinking," Lawson replied. "Every predator has blind spots, instinctual behaviors that can be exploited." Major Rodriguez joined them, his heavy footsteps announcing his arrival. "My team is ready for deployment, but we need a strategy that gives us a fighting chance." These things shrugged off standard weapons like they were nothing. Lawson tapped his tablet, bringing up a biological scan of a Vorax warrior. "Their natural armor has weak points, here at the joints and near their secondary breathing apparatus. So we need specialized weapons," Rodriguez said. Blake studied the images. "And we need to understand their larger strategy. They're not just random hunters, they're conquering systematically." Franklin pointed to the star map showing the pattern of attacks. "They're working their way inward, isolating outposts before moving to more defended targets." "Classic predator behavior," Lawson confirmed. "Remove the weakest prey first, then move up the food chain." Admiral Winters joined them, her face showing the strain of too many sleepless nights. "We just lost contact with the Neptune defense perimeter. 3 outposts gone dark simultaneously." The team fell silent. Neptune was the outer edge of Earth's main defensive line. "They're coming for the heart of human space," Blake said. Winters nodded grimly. "We have days, maybe a week before they reach Mars. Whatever plan you're developing, speed it up." As the Admiral left, Franklin turned to Lawson. "You said every predator has weaknesses. What are theirs?" Lawson smiled, a glint of something almost predatory appearing in his own eyes. "Predators get overconfident. They don't expect prey to fight back in unexpected ways. And most importantly, they've never encountered humans before." "What makes us different?" Rodriguez asked. "We evolved from prey species that became predators ourselves," Lawson explained. "We understand both sides of the hunt. And if I'm right, these Vorax have never lost a hunt in their entire evolutionary history." He looked around at the team. "They don't know how to handle failure, and that's exactly what we're going to give them." The war room inside Neptune's largest defensive station buzzed with urgent activity. Officers moved between stations, coordinating the last elements of the plan, while engineers made final adjustments to weapon systems. 3 days had passed since the meeting at Lunar Headquarters, and now humanity prepared to make its first real stand against the Vorax. Lieutenant Commander Olivia Grant studied the holographic display showing the deployment of Earth's forces around Neptune. At 32, she was younger than most officers of her rank, having risen quickly through the fleet due to her tactical brilliance and cool head under pressure. Now she commanded the stealth destroyer USS Defiance, a ship that would play a crucial role in the coming battle. "All ships report ready, Commander," her communications officer said, Olivia nodded. And the decoys? In position and broadcasting at full strength. The plan they had developed was risky. Instead of concentrating their forces to defend the Neptune, stations they had evacuated all non-essential personnel and set up what appeared to be thriving, vulnerable colonies on 3 of Neptune's moons. Each colony was actually a collection of automated systems, heat generators, and communication broadcasters designed to mimic human settlements. The real trap lay in the spaces between. Dr. Lawson entered the war room and moved to stand beside her. Despite the gravity of the situation, excitement shone in his eyes. The latest sensor readings confirm it, he said. The Vorax fleet is approaching exactly as you predicted. 3 hunting groups, each targeting one of our decoy colonies. Olivia allowed herself a small smile. Let's hope the rest of your predictions are equally accurate, Doctor. On the main screen, red dots appeared at the edge of the sensor range. Vorax ships moving into the Neptune system. They moved with confidence, clearly expecting another easy victory. All ships, maintain communication silence, Olivia ordered. Execute Phase 1. The human fleet, hidden in the shadow of Neptune's rings and its larger moons, powered down to minimal systems. The USS Defiance, specially modified with experimental cloaking technology, disappeared completely from sensors. The Vorax ships split into 3 groups, just as Lawson had predicted. Each group moved toward one of the decoy colonies, following their instinctual hunting pattern. They're taking the bait, Lawson whispered. Olivia watched the enemy formation carefully. Notice how they're not bothering to scan for traps? They expect prey to flee, not fight. The largest Vorax vessel moved into position above the largest decoy colony. Smaller ships circled around, cutting off escape routes. It was exactly the same tactic they had used at New Eden and the other fallen colonies. Phase 2, Olivia ordered. Mark targets and prepare to fire. Throughout the Neptune system, hidden weapon platforms powered up. The human fleet began to move silently into position, still running with minimal power signatures. The Vorax ships opened fire on the decoy colony, expecting to destroy defenseless buildings and flush out fleeing humans. Instead, they hit empty structures filled with sensor equipment and automated systems. Confusion rippled through the Vorax formation. For the first time, their prey wasn't behaving as expected. Now, Olivia commanded. All across the Neptune system, humanity's trap was sprung. Mines hidden in the rings detonated, sending clouds of superheated particles into the Vorax ship's sensor arrays. Weapon platforms opened fire from multiple directions. The human fleet powered up and attacked from behind. On the main screen, Olivia watched as the Vorax vessels attempted to regroup. They were powerful but suddenly disoriented, their careful hunting formation shattered. USS Defiance, moving into position, she said, strapping into her command chair as her own ship accelerated toward the largest enemy vessel. Execute attack pattern Delta. The Defiance moved through the chaos of battle, its experimental cloaking system making it nearly invisible. Dr. Lawson had identified a blind spot in the Vorax sensor systems. They relied heavily on heat detection, a holdover from their evolution as hunters. The Defiance's hull had been coated with a material that absorbed heat, making it as cold as the space around it. We're in position, the tactical officer reported. They don't see us. Target their propulsion systems and fire, Olivia ordered. The Defiance unleashed its full weapons array at point-blank range. The Vorax flagship shuddered as the carefully aimed shots hit vulnerable spots that Dr. Lawson had identified from the biological scans. Across the system, the human fleet pressed their advantage. For the first time, the Vorax were experiencing what it felt like to be hunted. 3 Vorax ships exploded as concentrated fire overwhelmed their defenses. 2 more broke formation attempting to retreat. The largest vessel, heavily damaged by the Defiance's surprise attack, turned laboriously to face this new threat. They've spotted us, the tactical officer warned. Incoming fire. The Defiance rocked as enemy weapons found their mark. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Evasive maneuvers, Olivia commanded. All power to forward shields. Continue targeting their propulsion. The battle raged for another hour. Human ships took heavy damage, but the Vorax had lost their greatest advantage, surprise. The carefully laid trap had worked exactly as planned. Finally, the remaining Vorax vessels pulled back and jumped out of the system. A cheer went up around the war room as the enemy signatures disappeared from sensors. For the first time since they had appeared in human space, the Vorax had been defeated. Admiral Winter's face appeared on the main screen. Despite her usual composure, she couldn't hide her relief. Well done, Commander Grant. It appears Dr. Lawson's theories were correct. Yes, Admiral, Olivia replied. But they'll be back, and they'll adapt. Of course they will, Dr. Lawson said, studying the battle data with intense focus. That's what predators do. But now we've proven they can be beaten. In the days that followed, analysis of the battle provided valuable insights. The Vorax ships were indeed powerful, but their tactics were predictable when understood through the lens of predatory behavior. More importantly, the aliens seemed to lack experience in adapting to unexpected resistance. They had never needed to develop complex battle strategies because their hunting patterns had always been sufficient. At Lunar Headquarters, Lieutenant Franklin stood with Major Rodriguez as they reviewed the battle footage. We hurt them, Rodriguez said with grim satisfaction. But Lawson says they'll come back angrier and more cautious. Next time they won't fall for the same trap. Franklin nodded. Then we'll need new traps. Across the room, Captain Blake was coordinating defense strategies with colony leaders. The Neptune victory bought us time, but not much. Intelligence suggests they're gathering a much larger force. Admiral Winters entered, her face grave. We just received a transmission. It appears to be from the Vorax. The room fell silent as she played the message. The image showed a Vorax warrior, larger than those they had seen before. Its 4 eyes glowed with intelligence and rage as it spoke in a deep, guttural voice that had been run through a translation system. Humans, it said, the translated word sounding like a growl. You have earned the attention of the Supreme Hunter. No prey has ever wounded the pack before. This makes your meat worthy. We will come for you and we will feast on your worlds. The message ended. No demands, no negotiations. Just a promise of continued hunting. Dr. Lawson smiled grimly. They're intrigued by us now. We're no longer just prey. We're a challenge. Is that supposed to be good news? Rodriguez asked. Actually, yes, Lawson replied. They're acknowledging us as worthy opponents. For a predator species, that's almost respect. Admiral Winters looked around the room at her team. The real war has only just begun. They'll return with greater numbers and new tactics. We need to be ready. Franklin stared at the frozen image of the Supreme Hunter. At least now they know. Humans aren't just prey. We can hunt too. 2 weeks after the victory at Neptune, Mars became the new front line. The red planet, home to over 5 million colonists, buzzed with activity as civilian evacuations continued around the clock. Military transports landed constantly, bringing troops and equipment to strengthen the defenses. In an underground research facility near Olympus Mons, Dr. Peter Lawson worked with a team of scientists to develop new countermeasures against the Vorax. The laboratory walls were covered with diagrams of Vorax biology, based on specimens recovered from the Neptune battle. Franklin, now promoted to full commander, entered the lab carrying a tablet with the latest intelligence reports. He looked different now, more confident with new scars on his face from a close call during a recon mission. They're coming, he said without preamble. Our deep space sensors detected a jump signature. The fleet is 3 times larger than what we faced at Neptune. Lawson barely looked up from his microscope. How long? Less than 24 hours. Franklin moved closer, lowering his voice. Is it ready? Lawson stepped back from his work, rubbing his tired eyes. Theoretically, yes, but we haven't had time to test it properly. On the table lay what looked like a simple canister with an injector attachment. Inside was a pale blue liquid that seemed to shift and move on its own. Will it work? Franklin pressed. It should disrupt their sensory systems, Lawson explained. The Vorax rely heavily on chemical receptors, similar to smell, to track prey and communicate in battle. This compound creates a kind of sensory overload, confusing those signals. Like smoke in a predator's nose, Franklin said, nodding. Exactly. But we only have enough for a few dozen canisters. Major Rodriguez's team will need to deploy them strategically. In the command center above them, Captain Susan Blake studied the defensive layout of Mars with Admiral Winters and the newly promoted Commodore Grant. The Neptune victory had earned Olivia Grant her new rank, but the USS Defiance had been too damaged to repair quickly. Now she commanded the planetary defense grid. We can't use the same tricks again, Blake said, pointing to the holographic map. Their supreme hunter will be watching for decoys and ambushes. Agreed, Grant replied. So instead of trying to lure them into a trap, we let them come to us. But on our terms. Admiral Winters nodded. The Martian defense grid is much stronger than Neptune's was. We have more ships, better positions. But the Vorax still outnumber us. Numbers aren't everything, Blake said. Dr. Lawson's research suggests they've never faced a prolonged conflict. They're used to quick hunts, not wars of attrition. So, we make this messy, Grant concluded. No clean kills for them. We force them to fight building by building, crater by crater if necessary. Blake pulled up images from Earth's military history. Guerrilla warfare, small mobile teams striking and disappearing, hit-and-run tactics. Not the usual way to defend a planet, Winters said with a frown. These aren't usual enemies, Grant reminded her. They think like hunters, not soldiers. Hunters get frustrated when prey doesn't behave as expected. The Admiral considered this, then nodded. Make it happen. I want every soldier to understand this isn't a conventional war. The next day the Vorax fleet arrived. Unlike at Neptune, they didn't immediately split into hunting groups. Instead, they formed a tight formation and approached Mars directly. Their flagship, twice the size of any vessel at the previous battle, led the way. They've adapted, Franklin observed from the secondary command center where he stood with Dr. Lawson. Just as you predicted. Yes, Lawson agreed, but they're still thinking like predators. Look at their formation. It's designed to prevent prey from escaping, not to maximize battle effectiveness. The Vorax opened fire on the orbital defenses, but made no attempt to communicate or demand surrender. They simply attacked, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. Mars' defensive grid responded, powerful energy beams lancing out from surface installations and orbital platforms. Several Vorax ships took direct hits but continued advancing. They're tougher this time, Grant observed. Their shields have been strengthened. The battle for Mars began in earnest as Vorax landing craft broke through the defensive fire and headed for the surface. Unlike at the colonies where they had simply destroyed everything from orbit, here they were sending ground forces. They want to hunt us personally, Blake said, understanding dawning on her face. This isn't just about conquest anymore. It's about proving themselves as superior predators. Major Rodriguez led his special forces team to intercept the first landing parties. Each soldier carried one of Dr. Lawson's canisters attached to their standard weapons. Remember, Rodriguez told his team as they took up positions in an abandoned mining complex. We're not trying to win stand-up fights. Hit them with the blue stuff, then fall back. Make them chase us into prepared positions. The first Vorax. Warriors emerged from their landing craft. 8 feet of armored predator moving with fluid grace despite their size. They spread out in hunting formation, sniffing the air with their secondary breathing apparatus. Rodriguez gave the signal, and his team opened fire from concealed positions. The special ammunition, designed based on Lawson's research, targeted the joints in the natural armor. Several Vorax fell, but others charged forward with frightening speed. Now, Rodriguez called. His soldiers activated the canisters, which released clouds of blue mist into the air. The effect on the Vorax was immediate and dramatic. They stopped their charge, four-eyed heads swinging in confusion. Some clawed at their breathing slits while others fired wildly in all directions. Fall back to position 2, Rodriguez ordered. Human forces disappeared into pre-prepared tunnels and passages, leaving the disoriented aliens behind. By the time the Vorax recovered, their prey was gone, but had left obvious tracks to follow. The aliens, driven by instinct and pride, pursued. The same scene played out across the Martian surface as human forces engaged, then retreated, leading the Vorax into kill zones and ambush points. The aliens, unused to prey that fought back intelligently, frequently found themselves exposed to crossfire, or trapped in areas where their superior strength gave them no advantage. In orbit, the battle was more conventional but no less fierce. The Vorax flagship targeted Mars's main defensive platform, pounding it with continuous fire. Commodore Grant coordinated the defense from a bunker deep beneath the Martian surface. "Our orbital defenses are failing," she reported to Admiral Winters. "We can hold the ground for now, but without space superiority, we'll eventually be overwhelmed." On the surface, Franklin moved with a squad of Marines, heading toward a downed Vorax ship that had crashed relatively intact. "Dr. Lawson thinks their ships might contain valuable intelligence," he explained to the squad leader. "We need to get inside before they send recovery teams." The Marines approached the crashed vessel, cautiously. The hull had split open, revealing corridors that seemed designed for creatures larger than the Vorax they had encountered. "Stay alert," Franklin warned. "This is their territory now." Inside the ship they found strange technology and hieroglyphic markings that seemed to tell the story of past hunts. But most valuable was what they discovered in what appeared to be the command center, a star map showing the Vorax home system and the extent of their hunting grounds. "They've conquered dozens of worlds," Franklin said in awe. "Maybe hundreds." As they downloaded the data, a noise from deeper in the ship alerted them. A massive Vorax, larger than any they had seen before, emerged from a damaged doorway, 4 eyes fixed on Franklin with terrifying intelligence. The Supreme Hunter had arrived. On Mars. The Marines reacted instantly, opening fire on the massive Vorax. Their specialized ammunition pinged harmlessly off thicker armor than the regular warriors possessed. The Supreme Hunter moved with surprising speed for its size, closing the distance in seconds. "Fall back," Franklin ordered. He activated one of Lawson's canisters, filling the corridor with blue mist. Unlike the other Vorax they had encountered, the Supreme Hunter merely hesitated for a moment, then pushed through the chemical cloud. It wore some kind of breathing apparatus that protected it from the worst effects. "It's adapted," Franklin realized with a chill. He fired again, aiming for the eyes, but the creature moved its head with uncanny precision. 2 Marines fell as the Supreme Hunter tore through their ranks. The rest retreated with Franklin toward the exit, laying down covering fire. Outside the crashed ship, Franklin activated his comm unit. "This is Commander Franklin. We have direct contact with the Supreme Hunter, requesting immediate air support." The squad's dropship swooped in, firing missiles at the ship's hull. The explosion bought them precious seconds as debris rained down. Franklin and the remaining Marines sprinted toward their extraction point. Behind them, the Supreme Hunter emerged from the smoke, unharmed and focused. "Sir," one of the Marines called out, "it's not pursuing." Franklin looked back in surprise. The Supreme Hunter stood watching them, its 4 eyes glinting with what seemed like amusement. It made a gesture that needed no translation. "This hunt is just beginning." Then it turned and disappeared back into the crashed ship. Franklin clutched the data drive they had obtained. "Get us back to command. Now." At Mars Command, Admiral Winters reviewed the situation with increasing concern. The ground battle had turned into a bloody stalemate. Humanity's guerrilla tactics were effective, but the Vorax kept landing more forces. In space, the situation was even worse. Half of Earth's fleet was destroyed or disabled, and the orbital defense platforms were failing one by one. "We need to consider evacuation," one of her staff officers suggested. "Not yet," Winters replied firmly. "We still have options." The door slid open as Franklin rushed in, still wearing his dust-covered combat gear. "Admiral, we recovered critical data from a downed Vorax ship, and I had direct contact with their Supreme Hunter." He quickly relayed what had happened, then handed the data drive to the technical team. Their leader came personally, Blake said, her tactical mind working. That means this isn't just another hunt to them anymore. Dr. Lawson entered the command center, looking exhausted but excited. The chemical deterrent is working better than expected on their regular forces. But we don't have enough to cover the whole battlefield. As they spoke, the technical team finished analyzing the stolen data. A junior officer approached the admiral. "Ma'am, we've located what appears to be their breeding world," she reported. "It's surprisingly close, just 30 light years from here." A stunned silence fell over the command center. Captain Blake was the first to understand the implications. "They've been hunting in our direction for centuries, clearing out all other spacefaring species. And the breeding world would be lightly defended," Franklin added. "No prey species has ever fought back enough to threaten it." Admiral Winters studied the star map carefully. "Their fleet is committed here. If we could strike at their homeworld, it would be like threatening a predator's den," Lawson said. "Even apex hunters will abandon a hunt to protect their young." The plan came together quickly. While the battle for Mars continued, a small strike force would slip past the Vorax fleet and jump directly to their breeding world. Not to destroy it, humanity wasn't prepared to commit genocide, but to demonstrate that humans could threaten what the Vorax valued most. "It's a dangerous gamble," Winters acknowledged. "Who will lead this mission?" "I will," Commodore Grant volunteered. "The USS Defiance has been repaired enough for one more fight." Admiral Winters nodded. "Take whatever crews and ships you need." "I'm going too," Franklin said. "I've seen the Supreme Hunter up close. I understand how it thinks." Within hours, a small strike force was assembled. The USS Defiance, along with 5 smaller, faster ships, prepared to depart from the far side of Phobos, one of Mars's moons. Dr. Lawson provided them with the last of his chemical weapons and a new device he had developed, a beacon that broadcast signals mimicking wounded Vorax young. "Use this only as a last resort," he warned. "It will enrage them but also draw them away from other targets." As the strike force prepared to depart, the battle for Mars reached a critical point. The Vorax had finally breached the main defensive line and were pushing toward the central habitat domes. Major Rodriguez led a desperate counterattack, using the underground tunnel network to appear behind enemy lines. The fighting was brutal, but it served its purpose, keeping the Vorax focused on Mars while the strike force slipped away. The journey to the Vorax breeding world took 3 days at maximum speed. When they arrived, Commodore Grant ordered the fleet to remain at the edge of the system while the Defiance moved in alone. "We're not here to start a genocide," she reminded her crew, "just to show them we can reach their heart." The breeding world was beautiful in a stark way, a reddish desert planet orbiting a yellow sun. Unlike the heavily armored warships, the defense platforms here were minimal. The Defiance easily slipped past them and entered orbit. Scans showed massive nursery complexes across the northern continent. "We've been detected," the tactical officer reported. "Defensive ships are powering up." Grant nodded. "Send the message, exactly as prepared." A simple communication was broadcast, planet-wide in the Vorax language translated by Dr. Lawson based on the recordings they had gathered. "We could hunt your young, but choose not to. The humans offer a choice, peace or mutual destruction." For long minutes there was no response. Then suddenly a familiar figure appeared on their main screen, the Supreme Hunter. How did it get back here so quickly? Franklin wondered aloud. "Computer," Supreme Hunter spoke, its words translated by the ship's computer. "You have entered the sacred grounds. No prey has ever found this place." There was something like respect in its voice. "We are not prey," Franklin replied, stepping forward. "We are hunters too. We choose not to destroy your young because we understand what matters to hunters." A long silence followed. The Supreme Hunter studied Franklin with all 4 eyes. "Thousands of worlds have fallen to us," it finally said. "None have reached our breeding grounds. None have shown mercy." The word seemed difficult for it to comprehend. "Then perhaps it's time for something new," Franklin suggested. Not predator and prey, but equals. 3 days later, the first peace talks between humans and Vorax began aboard a neutral station at the edge of Neptune's orbit. The war that had threatened to destroy humanity had instead forced the galaxy's most feared predators to recognize another species as worthy of respect. As Franklin watched the Supreme Hunter and Admiral Winters begin their historic meeting, Dr. Lawson stood beside him. "You know," Lawson said quietly, "in Earth's history, the most successful predators weren't always the strongest or fastest." "What were they?" Franklin asked. "The ones who learned to cooperate. The ones who understood that sometimes not hunting is the smarter strategy." Lawson smiled. "We just taught that lesson to the galaxy's apex predator." Franklin